Hello and welcome to this special bonus episode of the Huron Chamber Connect podcast. On October 2nd, 2025, the Huron Chamber of Commerce and the Goderich Port Management Corporation welcomed business leaders from across Huron County and across the Great Lakes marine shipping industry to the Port of Goderich to discuss the strategic importance of our Great Lakes ports, in particular the Port of Goderich, and especially in light of the planned expansion of the Port of Goderich. So we now present in 4 episodes the panel discussions, the presentations, and keynote address from the Huron Marine and Economic Forum.
So we will move on to our first panel of the day, and I'm really pleased to have as your moderator Jessica Linthorne, who is the president and CEO of the Nuclear Innovation Institute. I won't read her bio because you can all read, and so it's there for you. But Jessica was a natural choice for us for this role because not only her role at NII and their involvement in the community in Huron County and of course Bruce and Gray and this whole area, but Jessica's background in economic development is a real asset to us in guiding the conversation that this panel is about to have about the impact of ports on their host communities. And in this context, when I talk about a host community for this port, I'm not necessarily talking about Goderich. I'm talking about the entire county and even beyond. We have a representative here from Perth County. Where's Steve from the Stratford Chamber? Where you go?
Just over here.
There he is. So our colleagues at the Stratford Chamber, Bedford and District Chamber of Commerce are here today because they also recognize the impact that the Port of Goderich can have beyond Huron County's borders. So I'm very pleased to welcome Jessica to the stage, into the microphone, and she will introduce our panelists. Thank you.
I'll take the microphone down, but I'm not going to walk around it thinking these high heels are falling through the cracks of this stage if I'm not smart about it. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Colin, for the warm introduction. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. I am really proud to be here. I'm proud to represent the nuclear sector. My colleague Maggie is here with Bruce Power as well. So thank you to Bruce Power for joining the important conversation today too. Before I start and invite our panelists, I appreciate you may be going, okay, what's the nuclear sector got to do with this conversation and why does this matter? The nuclear sector, like municipal, like courts, we're no stranger to major infrastructure projects. This is a really exciting time, Frank. I really appreciated your presentation and took a whole page of notes and questions to ask you throughout the day today too. But we aren't strangers to major projects. We aren't strangers to community readiness. How do we help a community be ready for growth or be willing to support an expansion like what you're talking about today? Some of the work we do at the Nuclear Innovation Institute, it's a threefold mandate. We are a member-based not-for-profit organization, but 3 areas we focus: transformation projects, so supporting our founding members, Bruce Power, BWXT, Cameco, ES Fox, Kinetrix, Can Do Energy. That's the group that we're working with daily. So helping them find efficiencies in the work they're doing, in particular with Bruce Power. And then we're also loud advocates for the sector. So we have an industry voice portfolio. This is where we're talking about economic development. We're talking about the economic opportunity of Bruce C, new nuclear proposed build. But we also talk about economic opportunity across the Clean Energy Frontier region, which is Bruce, Gray, and Huron counties. We're really proud to be able to do that, proud to support local chambers, conversations like this, and we do recognize that we are stronger together. So, Colin, we do appreciate the partnership we have with you and your team. So our third portfolio at the NII is around skill development. This is about securing the workforce for today and for tomorrow, major infrastructure projects, right? We're planning years out. We're planning success for the next generations. We're planning a clean energy grid in the case of nuclear and the Bruce Power new build. There's a lot of work that goes up front. I've recently heard my board chair, James Skonyak, he's been repeating a message and it's resonating with me where he's talking about the decisions we're making today. These aren't decisions for us. These are the next generation, the generation after that. We got to make sure we've got the infrastructure in place to be successful. So when we think about the port and the expansion, that opportunity, we're really supportive and Frank, happy to help out as we're able. So with that, I do have a number of questions for our panelists. I'd like to invite Frank Hurkmans to the stage, Steve Salmons, and Jeremy Dunn. Please join me in welcoming them. I had the privilege of attending the reception last night at the Ben Miller Inn, and Minister Thompson was there. She brought wonderful remarks. It was great to connect with each of you last night. I like to go into a panel knowing who I'm talking to, so it was great to chit-chat a little bit and learn a little bit more about where you're from and your backgrounds and the opportunity ahead of us. So it was a nice event last night. Okay, I do have a number of questions, and I'm going to keep track of time. So I'll run through them, and I'm probably going to surprise you guys and throw a few different thoughts at you based on our conversation last night and today, but I promise nothing too challenging. So I referenced my background in rural economic development and Mayor Bazinet, you've heard me say, assessment growth and job creation. What does the, local mayor want to hear? Assessment growth and job creation. And so, but the second sort of, golden rule, we'll call it, when it comes to economic development is leveraging existing assets. It could be assets, infrastructure, it's assets, your people. I did see some small business owners here today. You're an asset in the community as local businesses. And so how do we leverage these local assets, and recognizing today we're talking about the port. Steve, I want to start with you with the Port of Windsor. So we do have two microphones, we'll just pass them around here, but from Windsor's perspective, Steve, can you share with us how Windsor sees economic benefit and value as a community directly from the port?
Yeah, well, thanks, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. You heard Frank's introductory comments this morning, economic impacts, the provincial impacts of about 70,000 jobs across Ontario, 4 million wages, the impacts in every community for ports are understated, usually under-recognized. I come from a community of, Port Windsor is one of the 17 national ports. It means nothing in terms of scale or importance. It simply means that we're under federal jurisdiction. We're one of the 17 ports Canada did not download to municipalities. So, we are about the same size as Guelph and I are about the same size. One's a municipal port, one's a national port. That's the only difference. But the impacts are the same. Frank in this college said about 2,500 jobs. We're the same, 1,200 people every single, wait with the mic here a bit. About 1,200 people every day come to work in the 11 operations at Port Windsor, about 2,500 jobs overall. That also means about $65 million in wages that come into the local economy. But, also significant, we buy and purchase $60 million worth of local services and goods every year. So that's a tremendous impact. And it's not just, even though the Windsor Port Authority, much like your introductory comment, about the various chambers locally, we are called Windsor Port Authority, but I constantly remind our county that we really be better off called the Windsor Essex Port Authority or the Southwest Port Authority. For example, relevant to this group, we buy between 70 and 80% of all grain from Sarnia to London to Windsor. Farmers are our largest customer. From that, we also then produce vegetable oil, which we're the largest vegetable oil producer and the largest on the Great Lakes out of our port. And if you eat if you eat fries at McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, it's being fried in oil made from Port Windsor. If you buy a 4-liter jug that says canola and or soybean, it's coming from Port Windsor. I don't care what the label says. So do we have impacts? Absolutely. Not just in Windsor, not just our 1,200 people, the 2,500 people direct, but the farmers, the retailers, the drivers, the train operators, the retailers, everybody gets a piece of the pie from a port, and yet we don't know that. I'll just share a very quick personal story. So I've been with the Port of Windsor for about 8 years. I don't have Frank's experience in this area, or frankly, Jeremy's. But when the opportunity came out, my wife said, "You should apply for the Port of Windsor." And I said, "What do I know about ports?" She goes, "Oh, you've got some leadership experience. You've been in senior executive for 30 years. I said, "Well, that's very flattering, thank you, but what have somebody that knows something about port supplies?" Turns out, here I am. But here's the real enigma about this. I was general manager of the city of Windsor. I grew up 2 blocks from the water. I led the Ontario government's initiative on the creation, location, and construction of a new Hurkmans Parkway that brings you to a $7 billion new Gordie Howe Bridge. And the first question I had when I got the job for interview is, I better do a little research to find out what and where this port is. How is that possible? Those types of economic impacts, that kind of presence in our community, region. There isn't a road built, a house built. There isn't, a project that happens in our city that is not directly related and made possible because of the Pepper's Port. So the impacts are in our daily lives everywhere around us. We always say globally, 90% of everything you have ever touched, worn, slept on, eat, use, was on a ship on some point as product of life. That's on the sea level. On the Great Lakes level, when you drove here this morning, it came from a port. That asphalt, that aggregate, the home you live in, the hospital, the building you work in, it's all coming through a port somehow. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. That's great, and what a good place to sort of level set and remind all of us. And I reflect on an event we hosted in partnership with the Green Ribbon Panel and the Toronto Region Board of Trade last Friday. We talked about federal policies as it relates to energy security, as it relates to economic resiliency. Steve, you referenced 60 million in local goods. And that local, that's the word that sticks for me, right? What does this mean for domestic? I know we have a panel later on with regards to tariffs and some of the local economic landscape. But I will say, this morning I'm putting my very specific Canadian flag pen because we ought to think domestic, we think local, we think made in Canada. And I wouldn't be doing my job without reminding that at Bruce Power, 95% of their spend on their major project or major component replacement is domestic. And that's worth celebrating. So to your point, Steve, I appreciate and also celebrate the local goods and as you just described, everything that we're interacting with is good through report. Frank, I want to ask you, that was a great presentation. Thank you. I really appreciated the history. I appreciated the sight of where we're heading with this expansion and what that goal could look like. Just building off of Steve's comments, are there critical steps that you see that have to take place today to secure your future at the port here?
Yeah, I would suggest there's a few critical steps. Initially, we went through participating in an exercise for CBSA to be able to come into the Port of Goderich and receive the containers. There's a challenge right now in container shipping by the vessel in general terms that everything kind of stops at Montreal right now, and it gets put onto a train or it gets put onto a truck. And the reason that is primarily is because CBSA sits at Montreal. They can receive and accept these containers coming from all around the world and set there. So we're part of the study right now for five other Great Lakes ports, including Windsor, including HOPA, including Picton, and including Valleyfield, I believe it is. So ideally what we'd like to see is to have the opportunity for CBSA receive those vessels here. So when I talk about containers and the opportunity for containers to come through the Port of Goderich, that's a step that needs to happen first. And then I also think that it goes without saying that this, we really skirted by a catastrophic event with the USTR and their mandate to have all Chinese-made vessels in the Great Lakes pay, to $1 million every time they land on a U.S. port. So the OMC pushed hard for that part of the mandate to be removed. Or if you think about it, Compass Minerals as an example, well over 90% of the vessels that come in there to lose salt over to the U.S. are built in China. So we skirted that. We don't know what's coming next from the U.S. in regards to tariffs and trade, and I know that's a discussion for later, and I don't want to get into that. But there's certainly some concerns right now in the envelope of products that are attached to CUSMA, which is the old NAFTA. And when that gets renegotiated, what does that look like, and the implications to the products that come out of the Fort of Goderich? So certainly those would be two concerns that we certainly need to know about.
Yeah, thank you. That's really fascinating. So Jeremy, I guess, building off of that, and Jeremy, welcome. And it's really great to meet you, representing, I'll let you do your own introduction, actually. We'll get your microphone, or you do this? I'll get you introduce yourself, Jeremy.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Dunn. I'm the Vice President of Operations at HOPA, the Hamilton Oshawa Port Authority. So the main business of the Hamilton Oshawa Port Authority, of course, takes place in Hamilton, which has the highest density of industry amongst the different assets that we have. We amalgamated with the Port of Oshawa in 2019, and we moved about 11 million tons of product throughout the Great Lakes. We also, through some private partnerships and some additional lands that we've acquired, have port operations in Thorold, Ontario on the Welland Canal. And most recently, we have 40 acres of land down in Port Colborne at the entrance to the Welland Canal on Lake Erie. And that's exciting for us because it creates the opportunity to run a 12-month-a-year port through Hamilton, because as you know, the Welland Canal closes for 2.5 months right now, along with the other locks that take product out to the ocean. And most recently, we've put an announcement out about a partnership with Sault Ste. Marie, exploring the idea of creating a port there, which again just adds to this wonderful corridor to bring product through the Soo down south, and hopefully vice versa, right? In partnership, hopefully with more collaboration with Goderich and Windsor. So all of us working together to promote this trade corridor and help kind of build more resiliency. So that's kind of what HOPA is, and I've been there about 6.5 years, and I came from the heavy construction business before that. So had some experience down in this beautiful area that's at a yield.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And I wanted to sort of let you set that stage, just recognizing that you've got a few different ports and that connection. And so thanks for taking the time to do that. I'm curious, three of you just referenced, working together. In your slides, Frank, you had put up some of the organizations. Is it a pretty collaborative industry? And maybe Frank, do you, when you think about your colleagues and the different groups?
Yeah, I would say that from a carrier perspective, from a port perspective, from a commodities representation perspective, it's typically the same individuals that you see at every event from coast to coast. And when I say coast to coast, I'm talking Vancouver to Halifax and coast to coast on the Seaway from Sept-Îles to Thunder Bay. And I was just at a Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Seaway Leaders Roundtable. Steve will join me in Montreal on Monday, and there certainly is a significant amount of attention being put to collaboration along the corridor. How do the folks in Thunder Bay help support the activities from an efficiency standpoint and inventory standpoint in Montreal, as an example? Yeah. And so there is collaboration. I think right now that with a number of industries that have their own events, it's a bit watered down, and we talk about this a little bit, that I'd like to see it more collective under one decision-making body across the board that can create this corridor, so there isn't 5 different people talking to 7 different organizations. There's one organization collectively talking to the people that can make the decisions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm biting my tongue on the watered down pun. Did you get that? Okay. No, I appreciate that. Jeremy, I did sort of jump over a question for you. But that's really good. When we think about that collaboration, we think about that approach and how do we position the industry, again, not different from the nuclear sector. We're also a big sector where we do need to be collaborative and position ourselves the right way for success. So Jeremy, I guess I'd like to ask you, we talked a little bit, we talked last night as well about how Port is an instrument to help diversify trade and counter tariffs. And we're not going to get too much into the tariff on this panel, but could you describe how it is that instrument?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just recently with the imposition of tariffs, I think we quickly found out that a lot of Canadian goods come through distribution hubs in the United States, whether it's coffee or a product that comes into the Port of Baltimore and makes its way across the United States into Canadian trade route, into Canadian supply chains. We're heavily dependent on the United States supply route. So I think as a first point, once the environment changed, it became very important to look at what mechanisms do we have and what supply chain opportunities do we have to bring this back to Canada so we're not dependent on the United States. So in the first place, I think the seaway system and all of the ports that are here and the others offer an opportunity for Canada to build its own more resilient supply chain that isn't dependent on the United States. We've seen it first with COVID. COVID was a great example of, Frank brought up containers, big volume containers that came into the Port of Montreal. The issue there was the dwell time. So containers are coming into the Port of Montreal during COVID and since, and the dwell time there could be weeks. You saw that on the West Coast ports, but the same thing happened in Ontario. So the Ontario economy is heavily dependent on how long it takes for containers to get out of the Port of Montreal, how long it takes them to get on the rail and make it down into the place in Ontario where most industrial output in the country happens. So in the first place, I think diversifying a supply chain, including marine in that as a way to support Ontario industry is a great idea. Also, when industry either here in your region or in Hamilton or other locations where there's a lot of industrial activity, the only way you can make it to world markets is to put it on a boat. Eventually it has to get on a boat. And, Frank, I think, alluded to the fact that a lot of the product that leaves here is going to world markets. And I think having that marine supply chain allows greater diversification to hit those world markets. And I think for those two reasons in particular, it's there. The other way that I will say we do it is, we're through our partnerships with economic development in the region, in Hamilton, in Niagara, and in Oshawa, partnering to bring in new businesses. Particularly that we've seen this year is on the manufacturing side, and it's been kind of a welcome surprise. You kind of thought the way tariffs were imposed, it looked like there was almost like a death knell for Ontario manufacturing, but we're seeing that resilience happen, and we're seeing that Canadian companies from across Canada. We have a most recent one is one from Quebec that's looking at building manufacturing in Ontario. And that's, again, to deal with the tariffs that are happening. So it's a pleasant surprise, and it's a show of resilience, how we can use these supply chains to, again, diversify and become more independent.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. And Aaron, Teeswater Concrete, we were chatting a little bit, but I attended an event in South Bruce, when was that, a couple months ago now, and we heard from Brock Dickinson, who's economic development, certainly an expert in the field, and he talked too about to your comment now on that sort of unexpected consequence or that nice little surprise we're seeing from these things that we weren't sure how it would land. He was talking about the significant international investment into Ontario and Invest Ontario seeing these international companies coming here because we have stability. And I wouldn't do my job without reminding them of a really clean grid too, thanks to nuclear. But just kind of building onto that, it's certainly a unique time that we are living in, and again, by working together, we'll have that strength. Steve, I wanted to ask you, and kind of building off the Great Lake and the seaport, when we think about local assets like the Great Lake ports, can you share with us how a Great Lake port is unique from a seaport?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think of shipping, world shipping, moving goods, we tend to think of containers, and these container ships are big. I mean, they're 12,000, 14,000. That's typically what they are. You come to CA, come into Montreal, but they're now getting up to around 24, 27,000 containers. They're larger than an aircraft carrier, 3 times longer than a football field. These are massive, massive vessels. And that's just an indication of how trade has grown around the world. It was only in the late 70s when the first container moved out of Baltimore down to Texas. And then somebody had the idea we could probably move it across to Europe and now to Asia, and it's growing. You've heard my colleagues reference containers. The movement of the reason that containers grew was ease of handling, the ease of distributing multiple products from one ship, and also the ease of logistics once they landed on shore. Move it onto a train, move it onto a truck. 100,000 containers are coming from the seaports into the Great Lakes, into Ontario, every single month. And they're coming in about 70% by truck, about 30% by rail. If we want to have a better connection to world markets, we have to adopt a logistics system that the world's looking for, and that's containerization. So, yes, we could continue to deal with Montreal, but I think it was Frank that mentioned, the brand new, $2 billion Central Core in Montreal, at capacity already. So it's not been built yet. So if we could get containers deeper into the Great Lakes through short sea shipping, and that's the distinction between the seaports and Great Lakes, short sea shipping. Everything we do here is mostly short sea shipping, right? We move products from Thunder Bay to LaGrange to Windsor. Salt from Windsor to Chicago, GTA, same story here at Goderich, same story, HOPA. Now we certainly do world shipping. We ship grains into Europe. We bring steel in from Asia and Europe. But there are markets that we can't access because we don't have containerization. The economics of loading containers and bringing them to Montreal and out versus bringing containers into the Great Lakes in sort of a milk run system. You stop at Picton, Hamilton, Windsor, Goderich, and then go back. So you drop off a couple hundred here on, pick up a couple hundred here all the way along. These are probably going to be ships of 600 to 800 containers. That's about as big as you're going to get for depth and width going through the locks in the seaway system. That has 2 massive advantages. One, I think Frank or Jeremy made reference, it cuts about 8 days of dwell time off. It also reduces the cost of each container by about $3,000. That's good for industry in terms of speed, in terms of cost, but also having a container facility within 10 minutes of your business in Goderich or in Hamilton or Windsor, that's a massive advantage. This is huge, this is big. I wasn't even aware containers were coming into you see them here and there, you'll see them. I wasn't aware how big it was. During COVID, the price of containers went from a few $1,000s to $25,000 plus because there was a shortage of movement across the globe. And I have a friend who's an executive VP with a large auto supplier fund. They got like 21 plants in states out here. And he said, we're paying for containers. I said, I know it's expensive, around 20 grand. He goes, I paid $35,000 for a container on the spot market. And I said, I didn't know you use containers. He goes, we bring in several dozen a month. And that's one plant in an industrial zone of Windsor. And I realized there are hundreds and hundreds of containers coming in and out of my city every month. And I'm not aware of it. And they're going to Montreal and they're waiting long times. They're paying too many costs for it. And that way you look around other industry who I talk to, they say, when are you going to get containers? They don't use containers because it's not a facility that's available, or because the facility is not available. It's a chicken and the egg thing, right? Because today they don't even make it a part of their logistics framework, their mindset. But we open up world markets from short sea shipping, stop, pick up, out to the ocean, and away they go to the world markets. So that's the connection, that's the distinction.
Yeah, thank you. And it's such a reminder too, there's so much going on around us that we don't see.
If I could just add to that,
please.
Typically when people think about containerization of products, they're thinking about furniture, different things like that, maybe stolen cars. They're thinking about like physical, tangible product that's going in there. There's a whole market of stuffed containers that are taking grains and seeds and everything else out of a local community here that has a significant impact here in county on grain. And there's facilities that specifically only do that, and that's what it's called, is stuffing containers. So it doesn't have to be a hard product that goes into a container. So just keep that in the back of your mind that when we're thinking about containers, it is not just for the purpose of hard goods.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Jeremy, so just shifting gears a little bit, can you describe or share with us how ports are tools towards a greener and a more resilient economy? So we talked a little bit about the economy, but maybe that greener side of it. And then also if you have some examples of partnerships that are growing that capacity to help Ontario businesses succeed.
Sure. Yeah, so on the greening of the economy, I think, like generally speaking, you're seeing that businesses are more interested than ever because their consumers are demanding it to show that not just the products that they create are green, but that the way they get to market is also green. And that's opening up an opportunity for ships to do more business because it's quite clear that, you know, when a ship can take like the equivalent of like a thousand trucks off the road, right? So I mean that's a pretty big carbon footprint that comes off the road with every ship that's moving goods. So and that story, you know, we've been telling that story for a while, and I think needed, you know, people in the industry and the supply chain start to understand that. So from that basic standpoint, we have companies that are willing to explore the marine, particularly container. It's really consumer goods drive a lot of this. So, you know, exploring the option of bringing containers into the local market as a way to green up the supply chain on its base level. Other ways that I think ports contribute to that is, you know, we're working right now. There was a press release recently that the Port of Hamilton purchased a company that was a resident tenant at the port called Biox. Biox is a biodiesel producer. And so, you know, that facility had closed. So, you know, from the point of view of one, preserving jobs, two, as a way to create a supply of biodiesels that can be used as ships and for the local market, you know, we decided to make that investment because we believe that there is a long-term market for biodiesel. And the evidence of that is, you know, we received a federal grant and we're working with a private company to develop a biodiesel bunkering facility down in Port Colborne right now. And the purpose of that is that these, you know, both the Algomas and the CSLs of the world that are shifting more of their fuel to biodiesels need a place to actually bunker it. And so Port Colborne, along with Windsor, I think it's already done in Windsor right now with Sterling Fuels, that will be another node that will hopefully, you know, increase the adoption of that fuel. And again, it may be just an interim fuel before, you know, future fuels available. But it's an important step to green the marine supply chain. So, I mean, those are a couple different ways. And a final way is, again, you know, partnering with the tenants in our ports. So in Hamilton and Oshawa and soon to be Niagara, we're making investments with those tenants to electrify their fleets, to do other things that make the whole port ecosystem greener. And finally, just say, again, you know, more of a transition fuel, but there are ships like the Gagny ships that use LNG and European ships that bunker LNG as a fuel for those vessels. And the Port of Hamilton was the first port on the Canadian Great Lakes to have bunkering of that fuel. So it's important when you have the land to make some of that land available for some of these greener technologies, because it spurs on new industries and it spurs on you know, a greener supply chain.
Oh, it's great. Thanks, Herbie.
If you don't mind, could I just add to that?
Of course.
I like to be the adder-inner.
Of course. I think you're going to do it if I said no.
Yeah, that's great. So when we think about biofuels specific, they talk about Hamilton, they talk about Windsor, here in Goderich as well. We got a company called Canadian Clean Fuels that wants the ability to transfer from rail car into truck and onto vessels. And I think, you know, when we think about green, that's a great exercise for us. And then also when you think about shore power, so that generators on vessels don't need to be running all the time. We do get the odd if the wind's blowing in the right direction, we get the odd question about, hey, what does it sound like furnace oil, or sorry, smell like furnace oil up here? And so we have added 100% capacity or 100% locations to our shore power to help mitigate that, so those generators need to run less. So that's what that's about.
That's great. Thank you, Frank. I'm very cognizant of time. We have a few minutes left, so this was going to be a bit of a rapid fire. But it's the rapid fire question, but it's actually the question that I am most curious about, and it's really about what you need from us, what you need from your local elected officials, what you need your economic development offices to know. It's the question of what can we all do to help. Like, if you had your wish list with some of those audiences, your community, your elected officials, your elected people, what can we do to help you?
I think what we would all want is a mayor like that, frankly. A mayor that's engaged, a council that's engaged, a community, a chamber that's engaged with your port. But that's two ways, right? Port also has to be engaged. So when I arrived in my job 8 years ago, the first man that I had, Steve, we want you to get out there. I already told you, I lived there all my life. I was with a senior government official, and I didn't know where or what the Port of Windsor was. That was a problem. And hopefully now we have a greater presence. So, but what the courts need from the community just to succeed better is more advocacy, right? Frank's mentioned the Ontario Marine Council a bit. We found that 3 years ago now. And one of the things we realized that 2 provinces and 7 states on the Great Lakes, the 3rd largest economy in the world, Ontario had no marine desk, no marine policy, no marine savings. And yet, when you think about it, you say, well, why would they? It's a federal thing, international trade, waterways, navigation, labor, training, environment, jobs, highways, connections, it's all provincial. And so we need, we need communities such as, Goderich and Windsor and Hamilton, but every other community, because even if you're not a port community, as we discussed this morning, your community and industry depends on port. And so we need a greater advocacy to say, we want to get trucks off highways. We want our industry to have access to world markets. To do that, Ontario has to make it a priority when they're making bilateral deals with the federal government. We just heard of the nation building, first 5 major projects. And we're quite frankly disappointed to learn that Ontario, well, one was the Ring of Fire, which is good, but the other was, a 60-kilometer tunnel in Toronto. That doesn't build the economy, it doesn't move our, province forward. What we need is short sea shipping and containers. And to get that, we have to have CBSA engagement. Right now, they've drawn a line at Montreal and they're not moving. We need communities across Ontario to stand up and trust the federal government to open up their economy.
Thanks to you, Frank.
I would say, part of the top of the line advocacy that we're trying to push right now is to make sure that the Port of Goderich is considered in any and all moves that are realistic. So in the past, where people may have thought that, Goderich's got a salt mine, they've got calcium chloride, they've got a grain elevator, and they're not going to be interested in that. Well, we go back to ringing the bell about that. The Port of Goderich is here. We don't necessarily need additional footprint to be able to handle the cargoes that are there now. We've seen that in August with a load of sand that was loaded up and discharged. But we really need the industry and our port partners to be able to put the Port of Goderich in the opportunity equation. And it may only be in there for a short period of time and go, hey, look, that's not going to work out of Goderich. But any type of exposure is good exposure in my mind. And when people are talking about the Port of Goderich, you're talking about the town of Goderich, you're talking about Huron County, there is no downside to that. I'll give you one quick example about that. There's SMRs, the small modular reactors that are being built in Cambridge, Ontario right now. We have a very, very good chance of a SMR coming from Cambridge by rail to the siding at the evaporator plant uptown, put onto a crawler, and then onto a barge at Dock 2 down to the port. When that happens, because I'm convinced that it will, when that happens, again, when you think about exposure perspective and what can really take place at the Port of Goderich, it isn't just throwing salt on a boat or grain on a boat or unloading some calcium chloride. We are have an absolute effort going into place in regards to expanding our cargo menu, and that is through broadcasting that and, if you will, ringing that bell.
That's great. Jeremy?
Yeah, I just to add to that, like, you certainly need your active folks and all senior members of the community and even the local businesses to be ambassadors for the port, because it definitely works both ways. I would say, you know, we're really fortunate. I'm really fortunate to work in Hamilton. I've, again, been there 6.5 years, but we're one of the ACTEV's first calls. They call us for everything. It's because, because, you know, we have the land, but we also have a track record of accommodating those new investments and helping people understand how those investments can fit into the community and possibly leverage the port. You're right that oftentimes or many times we have been able to help, but certainly we're good investors for the town also, or for the region also, and it's kind of vice versa. We both add credibility and add optionality. And I'll say, if you have European manufacturers or some of those European investments or global investors that are coming to look at your community, they understand the value of the port, even if we don't. So, like, I think it's important, like, if you can become that first call and be ambassadors for one another, I think that's a really important piece of it. Also, I say, one of our most important partners in Hamilton, like here, is Parrish and Heibecker. And Jay Fretz down there, he knows the challenges that come in working in a highly urbanized environment with industrial assets. And I say, what ports need and what industry needs is support to hold the line. Once you give up industrial land, whether it's on the harbor or not, once you give it up, you never get it back. And I think that we've done a fairly good job in Hamilton trying to keep people in the community educated on how the fort benefits the community. And we get a pretty good support for the municipality on that issue. And we've gained that in Oshawa. But what I did say is, we failed on a couple of fronts, particularly for PNH. There's a high-rise building that's supposed to be built next to one of the largest flour producers in Ontario, one of the largest grain terminals in Ontario, and that causes great consternation. And also on truck roads, we had some real setbacks on truck roads to access some of these properties. And what everybody understands, you want to get trucks off roads, but you also need the support of the community to support the industrial piece. So there's like the safety piece, and the community enjoyment piece, and then there's the industrial piece, which is really the lifeblood of what allows everything else to happen. So I think, working together to support that balance is important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap this up with my very quick reflection. I was taking a few notes there. So here's what I heard. For all of us to walk away from, we think, how do we support these ports and further expand our economy? Engaged communities, councils, business owners, aligning on advocacy effort. I love that. We do lots of really important, good advocacy work at the NII. Promote and be enthusiastic, ring the bell, to Frank's term, but that's really about increasing awareness, be ambassadors for our port. And I love your comment, Jeremy, as an economic development junkie, when you think about investment attraction, make the port one of your first calls. Because if you got somebody looking at coming to your region, they will recognize the power of a port. So thank you very much, gentlemen. That was a really good conversation. I think that we are set for a break and returning at 11 o'clock for the next panel. Thank you.